meeting of the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board to order. We'll begin with the roll call.
Give me 1 second while the recording is starting. There we go. Helen Jenkins.
Present.
Helen Jenkins is here. Andy Mefford.
Here.
Andy Mefford is here. Neva Hassanen. Neva Hassanen is absent. Michael Houlihan.
Here.
Michael Houlihan is here. Dudley Imprada. Dudley Imprada is absent. Jason Rice. Jason Rice is absent. Jamie Hoffman. Jamie Hoffman is absent. Stephanie Potts. Stephanie Potts is absent. Vince Caristo.
Here.
Vince Caristo is here. John Newman.
Here.
John Newman is here. And Chair, there are 4 members and 1 alternate present. Since members from the city are absent, would you like to appoint Vince Caristo as a voting member this evening?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. We do have a quorum with 5 voting members.
Okay, good deal. I heard the door. Maybe we've got another on the way. Okay, Peter's coming in. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the June 5th, 2018 meeting. Anybody have any comments about those or observations? I was not at that meeting, so.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion from Helen. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Houlihan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. Any public comment on items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Staff comments? Okay, no staff comments. Move on to our sole public hearing for this evening, which is the Woody Mountain Court subdivision. That's a county subdivision presented to us by Casey Drayton. Take it away, Casey.
And for the record, Peter Benson, do you mind announcing that you are here?
I am here.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. There are 6 voting members this evening.
Thanks, Heather. Go for it, Casey.
Thanks, John. Casey Drayton here to present the Woody Mountain Court 25-unit mobile home court major subdivision in Missoula County. The applicant for the subdivision is Greil Enterprises, represented by Territorial Landworks, who's here with us this evening. We have our planning board hearing tonight, July 17th, and this will go in front of the Board of County Commissioners on August 9th. The project location, as mentioned, is in Missoula County, out Highway 200. This would be just to the west of the West Riverside area, north of Interstate 90, and north of the Clark Fork River, as shown on the map on the screen there. Taking a closer look at the property, this is legally described as parcel 1D1 of Certificate of Survey 6443. We have just under 13 acres of property here that we're working with for this subdivision. The access to the subdivision, as shown on this closer shot, is provided by Highway 200 as well as Tamarack Road. Those are your 2 nearest and adjacent public roadways. One, Highway 200 is state maintained, and then Tamarack Road would be a county maintained public roadway located at the southeast of the property. You can see from this screenshot that the existing conditions are vacant on the property. There has been some disturbance, as you can see. We do have Pine Grove Lane, a private named roadway that does bisect the property currently and accesses some property to the south. Other than that, the primary improvements would be mainly for utilities that kind of cut across there, as well as it looks like some stock fill and material may have been placed there associated with a construction business located just to the south of this property. These shots taken just from the Google Street View give you kind of an idea. It's primarily open grassy land with some moderate tree cover, some of which are fairly large in size, some are a bit smaller, so it varies across the property. And these give you another look as well. The bottom one's taken from Tamarack and Pine Grove. The top one is taken at the east edge of the property looking back into it. Proposed, as mentioned, is a 25-unit mobile home court subdivision. Mobile home courts do go through subdivision review. The result of this subdivision will be essentially a 1-lot subdivision with 25 units for lease or rent for mobile homes. A lessee would come in with their own mobile home, place it on the site. Because there's multiple of those on the properties, it does trigger subdivision review. So it would be a named subdivision. Instead of dealing with a subdivision plat, in this case, we're dealing with a subdivision plan. So you'll see that it's referred to that throughout the staff report, as well as in the conditions and the findings, that we'd be making recommendations on the final plan and not the final plat necessarily in this case. As mentioned, Highway 200 is going to be your primary access to this area. They do have an existing Pine Grove lane that comes off Highway 200. They're proposing to continue to utilize that access. That would then go to a new road, which would sort of bisect the subdivision property and cut over to Tamarack Road. Similar to what Pine Grove Lane currently does, just to the south of it, they are proposing a reconfiguration of a portion of Pine Grove Lane with the subdivision, and we'll get into a little more detail on that here in a few moments. Looking into the review criteria for subdivision requests, zoning and growth policy compliance would be our first one. This property is within the 1998 Urban Comprehensive Plan area. That plan designates this property as primarily residential use at 2 dwelling units per acre for the maximum density. There is a small corner of the property shown at the west edge there that's designated as parks and open space. It's a pretty slim amount of the property there that's shown within that parks and open space. The rest, as I mentioned, would be 2 dwelling units per acre, which is fairly characteristic with the surrounding residential development. The property is unzoned, so there's no zoning designation on it. With 25 units on this property, it comes in at a density of 1.93 dwelling units per acre, so it's under that recommended 2 dwelling units per acre. The 1998 Urban Comprehensive Plan lays out sort of a framework for development patterns that says areas that have a lot of community facilities can support up to 6 dwelling units per acre. Areas that have some facilities such as road infrastructure, schools, police protection, fire protection, things like that could support up to 2 dwelling units per acre. And then it goes down from there as you get more out into sort of a rural nature of the county. So here we see that we do have roads adequately serving this property, and it is pretty close to local services. However, we don't have that community municipal water system or municipal sewer system located out in this general vicinity. So that's how the comprehensive plan sort of derives that 2 dwelling units per acre is a pretty good number for this area. It goes on to recommend that a variety of housing types is recommended, and that's what we're seeing here, is something a little bit different. It's been a while since Missoula County has seen a new proposal for a mobile home court, so it is unfamiliar to a lot of people to see one of these coming forward, but it is recommended in the plan that there's more than just single-family lots available for someone to develop their property with. Looking at ag and ag water user facilities, the site is mapped as prime farmland if irrigated. That soils information is derived from the NRCS web soil survey classification maps. There was a soil evaluation completed on the site in 1997, and the characteristics found were consistent with that NRCS mapping, that these soils could support prime agriculture. As mentioned earlier, there is some soil disturbance on the property, so we found that some of those soils may not be the original soils on the property. It looks like there is some fill there, as well as the roads and utilities that have gone through have stirred those up quite a bit. Agricultural use is currently absent from the property. We feel that it's been absent for most of the history on this property. The Urban Comprehensive Plan designates it for residential, so it hasn't been designated as an agricultural tract. The Community Food and Agricultural Coalition, CFAC, did weigh in on this proposal. I believe they actually took a site visit out there as well. And they commented that it may have hosted a small-scale crop at some point in time. They do have a surface water right to the Clark Fork River. However, CFAC was unable to locate any point of diversion or way to access that water, so they feel that it hasn't been used in years, and the viability of that water was in question. So CFAC does not oppose the subdivision due to the lack of viable agricultural operations and their support of affordable housing. So obviously they're not too concerned with the agricultural aspect here. Looking at ag water user facilities, as mentioned, they do have that surface water right. They also have a provisional water use permit, groundwater right for domestic and domestic irrigation purposes for a 25-unit mobile home court. And without an ability to access those surface water rights, they have no real viable agricultural operation here. There's no other irrigation ditches or anything that could deliver that water to them. We have recommended a condition of approval that puts a notification in the covenants that if any adjacent property or some portion of this property ever was to establish any sort of an agricultural use, it at least sort of notifies and educates homeowners to state that this area has been mapped as prime farmland. So that's a pretty standard recommended condition that goes along with any subdivision on prime soils. Looking at local services for this subdivision, we're going to start by taking a look into the road network that we have here. The site's located in the urban area and subject to urban standards found in the Missoula County subdivision regulations. Primary access is provided by Highway 200 and then also Tamarack Road. Those are both publicly maintained roads. Pine Grove Lane, again, is a named private access from Highway 200 that bisects the subdivision. This drive provides access to approximately 6 properties located south of the subdivision, and that was based on a rough count from aerial imagery. I can't say if maybe there's more than one dwelling unit on a property. It could be a little bit above or a little bit below that 6 number there. The proposed Road A, as mentioned earlier, will provide the primary access to all of the units within this subdivision. They are proposing to bring that road up to the county standard of a 24-foot wide paved surface. Then they would have a 20-foot wide access, which would take you to 2 parking spaces for each of the units. So that's all these little hammerhead style driveways that you see showing to each of the numbered units. Mobile home park standards do allow for a road to be created within the subdivision without providing additional right-of-way or an easement for it because the property is all owned by one person. They'd basically be granting themselves an easement, which doesn't logistically make sense, so they're not required to grant an easement with the roadway. So there, as you can see on here, a typical road would have an additional buffer zone on the sides. There are setbacks required of mobile homes from roadways. However, there's not an easement that follows proposed Road A through there. The road has been designated as a no parking road. That's that 24-foot standard. It's not wide enough to accommodate parking for a 2-way road through there. The covenants for the development did make mention of allowing for guest parking for a temporary period along the road. And since they're not proposing any additional guest parking in the subdivision, we've made a recommendation to remove that language, to restrict parking on the road, and then to create 3 parking spaces for guest parking. That meets the requirement for a mobile home court per Missoula County subdivision regulations. That number doesn't come out exactly. It comes out to like 2.5 spaces for this development, so we recommended 3 spaces as a condition of approval. The reconfiguration of Pine Grove Lane, as I mentioned earlier, it used to trace the line here that's kind of hatched over. It was a gravel road. They're proposing basically to come in and access the properties directly south of Pine Grove Lane, still off of that current configuration. They would then remove a portion of that roadway and reconfigure it as a 20-foot wide paved road. Anybody accessing it would come in, hit proposed Road A, have to make a right-hand turn between mobile home spaces 24 and 25 to enter onto what would be that Pine Grove Lane access to those properties to the south. The applicant is proposing to pave those relocated portions to 20 feet in width. That 20 feet in width is 4 feet shy of what our subdivision regulations would call out for road standard providing access. So there is a variance request associated with that portion of roadway to allow that reduced standard by 4 feet. That Pine Grove Lane relocated portion would then join back up with the existing portion about halfway across the development site. The existing portion would then remain as it stands today. They're not proposing any changes. That road does bounce off the property for a short stint and then back onto the property again. So it's partially on-site, partially off-site for that second half that goes out and accesses Tamarack Road. In review of the information we had available and talks with the applicant, we don't believe that there's been any sort of platted right-of-way or private access easements of record to allow these property owners access across there. The property owner did provide an opinion from an attorney that stated that there was likely some sort of prescriptive easement across there. I'm not entirely sure how a prescriptive claim would come out considering you've reconfigured it, but they're not proposing to cut off anybody's access. They're just altering a little bit, and in fact, they're improving a portion of it by paving it, but it does change the flow of traffic through there in some aspect or another. We did receive a couple of comments on the access of Pine Grove Lane. Those are included as attachments B and C to the staff report. So feel free to read through those. They had some concerns about just the flow of the traffic, dust, and safety that was associated with that reconfiguration and the additional development on the property. See, subdivisions in the wildland-urban interface, which this is in, are required to provide more than one access. That's a requirement for major subdivisions. We found that this subdivision does have more than one access point to it. In fact, they have 3 accesses out to county roadways. So the one at the existing approach of Pine Grove Lane to Highway 200, their new proposed approach onto Tamarack Road, as well as the existing approach to Tamarack Road from where Pine Grove Lane would make that exit. So we found that they do meet that requirement. We've recommended some standard conditions on signage, RSID, waiver statements, and some upgrades to the road maintenance language in the covenants for the subdivision. Other than that, the rest of the findings and recommendations are pretty straightforward on that front. Looking at pedestrian facilities associated with the roadways, because this is an urban area, major subdivision, they could either choose to do sidewalks on both sides of the roads or a larger sidewalk on one side. They're proposing that 8-foot larger sidewalk on one side of proposed Road A. You can see that sidewalk. I've shown a cut of it here. They're showing it adjacent to proposed Road A. The subdivision regulations require a 7-foot boulevard spacing, and I've shown a cut of the regulations down below. So that would basically be the road would end. There'd be a 7-foot grassy or landscaped boulevard, and then the pedestrian facility to provide some separation there. The applicant has requested a variance to allow that 8-foot pedestrian trail to be contiguous and adjacent to run parallel along the road. Some of their justification is that it reduces maintenance and it makes it a little bit easier, and the functionality of the subdivision improves a little bit because they're trying to keep their development footprint fairly tight here, and the more space you put in between everything, the further you have to spread it out on the site. Parks, Trails, and Open Lands did make a comment on this variance request that they did not support it. They felt pedestrian safety is compromised being directly adjacent to traffic, and that it potentially could serve as like a parking area. People would look at it as kind of a striped shoulder parking. They did recommend an alternative of potentially a 6-inch separation, so a 6-inch grade change between the pedestrian trail and the traveled surface, and some sort of delineation like a striping on it. So staff has recommended that as a condition of the variance approval. We are recommending approval of that variance with the condition to raise the pedestrian trail 6 inches. It'd still be adjacent, but it would provide at least a little notification to a potential vehicle that might drift over the line there. We felt that maintenance of that wouldn't be necessarily compromised either, that they could still plow it in the winter fairly easily being adjacent, and with a little grade break, we think they can still probably get their equipment up there to keep that clear. Let's see here. Second pedestrian facility requirement for this subdivision would be to extend the non-motorized facility that lies on adjacent properties across the frontage of the subdivision along Highway 200. So there's currently the Bonner Streetcar Trail East shown in these two photos below. This bottom right picture is shown looking back in towards Bonner. That trail extends out of Bonner, comes up to Tamarack Road, which is the intersection shown on the left here, and currently dead ends. The subdivision regulations require that that trail be continued across the Highway 200 frontage. It is a fairly long frontage of approximately 1,700 feet or so. The applicant is requesting a variance to the actual construction of that trail. They are willing to grant a 25-foot access easement through there if the county or by some other means was able to come in and put that trail in. The easement would be in place. They're basically asking for a variance not to construct it at this time. Staff is recommending denial of that variance request, seeing that it does provide substantial benefit to the property owners of this subdivision and future property owners of the area, that they would have the ability to utilize a non-motorized connection all the way back to the school system, the riverfront trail system, Milltown State Park, or any employment centers back in Bonner. Looking at water and sewer, local services for this subdivision, they're proposing a public water supply and a public on-site sanitation system. Both of these will be locally contained onto the property. However, they'll serve all 25 of the mobile home units, so they won't each have their own well and septic. They'll use these shared systems. There are 2 wells located on the property. These were approved with a groundwater right permit for 25-unit mobile home court, which is what we're looking at. Those wells are shown in the red outline. They're located near units 11 and 13. They're also proposing, as mentioned, this public sewer system. This would be a type 2 or a level 2 treatment system to serve the 25 units within the subdivision. Because of this level 2 treatment system and the amount of flow that's going to go through it with 25 mobile home units and the proposed rates that they would push through there, they do need a groundwater discharge permit, which they currently have. The actual sanitation system itself will have to go through local review, sanitation and subdivision review. For the COSA rewrite of this property, it's currently approved for a single-family dwelling, I believe it is. So they'll have to go through that process with the City County Health Department to approve this facility. The City County Health Department mirrored that comment that it needs to go through that process still. The DEQ and the City County Health Department will certainly look at the comments made here tonight on the system to weigh any relevant conversations that we have. Looking at the information provided in the application, we feel that there's adequate quantity and quality for the water system, and that the sewer treatment system, sanitation system for this property will provide an adequate treatment as to not negatively affect nearby wells or groundwater. I think groundwater is 50 or greater feet below the surface at this property, so there is pretty good separation here before you hit that. Looking at the Parks and Rec aspect of local services, the majority of this property will be in what's referred to as common area. Mobile home court subdivisions are required to provide 1/9 of the property area in parks or common area, as it's referred to here. So that would be 1.44 acres. This subdivision is proposing 9.92 acres, so the majority of the property is going to be open. Everything in green there is shown as common area. They are proposing common area 1, which is shown over top of the drain field area here on the left-hand side, to be utilized as active recreation area. The applicant has proposed to grade that out to less than 5% grade to support active recreation if kids wanted to go out there and have a ball game or whatever it may be. The subdivision regulations require areas of active recreation to be graded to 3%. So we've made a recommendation that an area totaling 1.44 acres be graded to 3%. We feel that's what the subdivision regulations require, and that's adequate space. And we feel that could be accomplished fairly easily just based on the topography over there. Looking at the natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat, I've thrown this shot up just to kind of give us a little bit of a context. in terms of where this property lies in relation to surrounding development. We feel that based on the disturbance to the site, surrounding residential development, transportation corridors, in the river, and lack of comments received from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Five Valleys Audubon, or any other wildlife or environmental organizations, that there's not going to be many concerns with the natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. There is some mature tree cover on the property, and the applicant has stated their intentions in the application of doing their best to preserve as much of that as they can. The rest of it's primarily native grasses. They have provided some information on weed management on the site, and we are recommending some standard conditions on weed management and revegetation. And just to jump back a second, I apologize, I skipped it over with local services, is that we feel that there's an adequate school system in place to accommodate the estimated 12.5 school-aged children resulting from this subdivision. And Missoula Rural Fire District is going to be serving this property from their nearest location 2.5 miles away. The road network meets or exceeds their standards of access requirements to each unit within the subdivision. And the applicants proposed a fire hydrant as their water supply for fire suppression. We've recommended a condition that be reviewed and approved for location and flow by Missoula Rural Fire District prior to the final plan approval. Looking at public health and safety, the subdivision does not contain any FEMA-designated floodplain. That is the FEMA floodplain map shown on the left-hand side there. You can see there is some Zone A floodway located in close proximity on the adjacent properties. However, it's significantly lower than this subdivision. The grade drops pretty substantially down to the river over there. So this site's located higher. We didn't receive any comments of concern from the county floodplain administrator on that front. The property is within the Missoula County air stagnation zone outside of city limits. That air stagnation zone runs to where this white line shown here, approximately just past the confluence of the Blackfoot and the Clark Fork out there. So with that, we've recommended a few changes to things within the covenants to the stove requirements. It does require that all new roadways be paved, which the applicant's proposing already. We've also noted that groundwater levels are shown to be greater than 50 feet below the surface, so we don't have any rising groundwater concerns here. We don't have any radon concerns that have been identified. It's not estimated that there's, or believed to be, there's not going to believed to be any basements with these mobile homes, so it's less of a concern on that front. Looking at compliance with survey requirements, the applicant has provided a preliminary plan that complies with those requirements. Looking at subdivision regulations and review procedures, there is a specific section in Chapter 4 of the Missoula County Subdivision Regulations that addresses mobile home courts. The applicant has addressed most of those with their preliminary plan. We are recommending some final plan checklist items is what we call them, things we'll look for when they come in, just to make sure those improvements have been completed. Some of those would be setbacks of mobile homes from the roadway, visual screen or buffer along the perimeter lot lines to any neighboring residential development. They have proposed that on the preliminary plan to basically surround the mobile home portion of the development, and then that the developer would install the actual pad sites for the mobile homes. So either a gravel or paved pad meeting a minimum dimension of 14 feet by 70 feet, and I believe they plan to do it at a scale even larger than that to accommodate like a double wide type mobile home here. As mentioned, we did receive the 2 comments from adjacent property owners that are included in the staff report as part of the subdivision regulations and review procedures. It was sent to adjacent property owners through certified mail. The property was posted in 4 locations with posters approximately at each of the corners of the property, and a legal ad was run in the Missoulian on 2 separate occasions prior to today's hearing, to notice of this hearing, as well as the Board of County Commissioners hearing in August. The subdivision's proposed in 1 phase. We feel that all the necessary easements for utilities have been put in place. There was one 15-foot potential future sewer utility line that bisected this property. They're showing a relocation of it, and they're relocating it with a 20-foot wide utility easement for that sewer, which meets current subdivision regulations. So they've actually increased that easement by a little bit with this preliminary plan. And as mentioned, this property does have physical and legal access to Highway 200 and Tamarack Road, both public roadways. So this would be a full shot of that preliminary plan that you have in your packets, showing the 25 units and surrounding development on it. And just to circle back to staff's recommendation found in the staff report, to start with the variance requests, staff is recommending approval subject to one condition, to relieve the applicant from creating the 7-foot boulevard between the pedestrian facility along proposed Road A. The condition of approval there was to raise it 6 inches and stripe it to delineate that pedestrian trail. The second variance request, staff is recommending denial to alleviate the applicant of the requirement of constructing the pedestrian trail along the Highway 200 frontage. So with denial of that variance request, they would be required to install those improvements for the full extent of the property. And the third variance request has to do with the road standards for Pine Grove Lane, those relocated portions, to allow them to be 20 feet in width as opposed to the 24-foot wide as established in subdivision regulations. And with those variance requests and all the findings of fact in the staff report, staff's recommending that the Woody Mountain Court subdivision be recommended to the Board of County Commissioners for approval, subject to the conditions that are found in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it. Does the applicant or the applicant's representative wish to speak at this time?
He does.
Mr. Forsting?
Yeah. All right, great. Paul Forsting, Territorial Landworks. I'm the applicant's representative. I'm here today with Bob Greil. He's in the salmon-colored shirt there on your left. His brother Tom Greil's right next to him, and then his wife Mary, Tom's wife Mary, yeah, she's right there too. Bob, Tom, and Mary all live right really near to this project, and so they've kind of a good reference. They know the neighborhood, and yeah, and Bob will get up and he'll after me and give some information about the project. So let me start the show here. Well, let me start by saying I'm excited to be here. This is the first mobile home project that I've worked on over the last 11 years. We've had a lot of interest in them. There's a lot of demand for mobile homes in this area. Yeah, but unfortunately, this is the only one I've ever been able to bring forward. And the reason that is because they're very expensive to put together. You put together essentially a very similar infrastructure package that you would with single-family homes, and so you don't see a lot of them. I'm not sure they're permissible at anywhere in the city. You know, you see a lot of them being taken out. I'm not sure they are. I was going to check and I didn't, but I've never heard of anybody doing any new ones in there. There's certainly some left in the city. But more and more you see units being taken out and then new apartment buildings and such being put in. And, you know, those folks are finding it more and more difficult to find a new location for their mobiles. So anywho, that's kind of an interesting element of the project. The costs themselves, you know, to put all that infrastructure can be very expensive for single-family houses, and so people are very cautious with those, and even more cautious when you're doing a mobile home court. I've heard that mobile home courts are the only true privately funded low-income housing option in the United States. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but it certainly seems to be pretty close in Montana, or in Missoula at least. You know, if it's not subsidized and somebody's privately developing it, they certainly have to. Cost is super important. We have to create a product here that people can afford. You know, Bob's comfortable talking about rents and whatnot, and how he calculates those rents, and he hopes this project is competitive with the nice mobile home parks in the area. We've got a lot of infrastructure going in here. Casey mentioned a lot of it. We've got roads. We've got an expansion of the road for a trail. We've got a public water supply system. We've got a level 2 sewer system. Bob's going to bury an overhead power line that crosses the site. Bob's going to pave an existing gravel park road to provide access for the neighbors. Bob's going to make some improvements. Bob's going to put gravel pads down, and so there's a lot that goes into the cost of this, and it's a balance for sure. So it's just something to keep in mind when, it certainly reminds me of why they're difficult to get approved and why you're not seeing a lot of them, and I don't suspect you will see a lot of them in the future. You really needed the right combination here, and what we have is somebody with experience, Bob, and Bob and Tom operate and own a couple mobile home parks, and I'll show you those. And Bob, they're the landowners, and that's really the winning formula. When you see somebody who has land and experience in the industry, then you see them moving forward with projects, even though the risk is pretty high with the cost. So let me take you through some slides. I'm hoping I'm not trying to be redundant with really anything I've got here. I think it all supplements and adds to what Casey had there. Here's the site, and Casey showed you that. What is interesting, I wonder if I can you guys see my mouse? Probably not. Is there? There's several mobile home courts around here. There you go. And so we'll start over here. This is Grile Loop, and this is aptly named Grile Mobile Home Court. There's 8 units there, and that's Bob's adjacent property, and that's his mobile home court, or one of them. There's a couple larger mobile home courts across the way here. One is Tamarack. I don't know the other names of them. And there's actually several of them. There's a larger one further east here, and Bob's other court, the court that we're modeling this project after, is Newcastle Court, and that's located over here east of the property over off of Juniper Drive. And let me show you what that looks like. This is what the park looks like. You'll see it's very similar to how we've got our park designed. We've got this is a 24-foot road, and when it was approved, that was sufficient for a roadway and a 4-foot walkway. And so that's what they were approved with for pedestrian facilities. That road looks like this. Bob can tell you how that's functioned. He hasn't heard of any conflict with it. It's worked great. Folks walk down the street. The traffic's low volume. There's 24 units here. We'll have 25, so we'll have one more. You can see they have these same kind of stem road networks here, and I'll show you what that looks like in reality. We've got the same concept where we've got common area. Nobody's allowed to put a fence up. And so when we talk about limited common area, certainly folks are, it's kind of their area. You'd go put a chair down there and you'd feel like it's yours, but it's not fenced off, and you can make your way through anywhere through the site. That's the same theme we're going for with our project. Here's a blown up version of it, and here's one of those stems, and you can see I call them stems. They're actually roads. That's a road here, and then we've got a couple units accessed from behind there. And so again, this is a 24-foot road. 24-foot road. We're going to be doing a 24-foot road with an 8-foot attached striped walkway. And I'll show you what that looks like here. But so you can imagine this road plus 8 more feet is what meets the minimum requirements with our variance. So this is exactly what we're going for. This is Bob's park, and he can tell you it looks really nice to me. They've done a great job of situating all the homes in here. They're all on gravel pads. That's what we'll do here. He's kind of tried to put in between the trees and keep as much existing vegetation as he can there. It looks really nice, and we're trying our best to duplicate that with this project. Here again is that common area schematic that Casey showed you. Again, we've got the open concept. There'll be no fences between here. Folks can get to the park and from. They'll be able to walk along that road, which is got a striped 8-foot 8-foot road. Here's what the park actually looks like, that section on the western portion of it. This is what it currently exists as. Bob's actually got some better pictures today that unfortunately you don't have in a digital format, but this is what it looks like. It's pretty flat. We don't think we'll have any trouble kind of meeting that 3% graded requirement. It's a larger area, so this is what that park area will look like. This is what I've had a lot of questions when you get out here and we're going to put our drain field in that park, and so there's been a lot of questions from folks that I get on occasion in meetings like this. Hey, is that how unusual is it to have a drain field in a park? What is that going to look like? Is that going to cause a problem? And so this is what Newcastle Court's drain field looks like. It's aside from some weeds being on there, it's pretty nice. Anybody who lives in a rural area has got a drain field in their backyard, and their kids are out there playing, or generally it's in their yard, right next to their tank or close to their tank. It's not uncommon to be in common areas. This is one at Mountain Meadows down in Florence, a system we used to do operation on. Those are the actual tanks for treatment, and then the drain fields are in that field. And so that's what a common area with the drain field looks like. It just looks like an open field, and people use it as such. And so it does come up on occasion, though, and so if you had any questions, that's what it looks like. And this is what Peaks looks like here, the Peak Health and Fitness Center. This is there. If you've ever been out there, they have between their complex of buildings, they have a green space, and that's a drain field that's getting a lot of water, getting a lot of use, so to speak. This is a existing trail along Spurgeon Road in the target range. This road is a 24-foot road, and this trail is between 5 to 8 feet. Ours will be 8 feet. You can see the stripe there. This is exactly what we're proposing to do. This is something the Parks Department operates. They have no separation of grade between it, and we're not asking for. We don't want that either. We would like this exact model to be put in our subdivision. Bob's got the experience with Newcastle, and everybody, he hasn't had any complaints with this 24-foot road. Well, we're going to put 8 more feet to that, and we're going to stripe it, and it's going to look exactly like this. There's some 50, 60 houses that are using this road here, driving faster than they're going to do in our cart. And this person here feels comfortable walking their baby down it. And there's actually another, if you follow the road on Google Earth, you can find another person walking there. It's a comfortable trail. Folks go to Kelly Island on it. It's completely sufficient, and the Parks Department, has it within their inventory. And so when we get to our project, when we're looking at it, it's unusual, well, not unusual, I would say, but it's something, it's worth pointing out. There's also a trail over by Clements, or on Clements, over by Spurgeon and, it's south in Clements, right on the intersection, and we have a similar striped path. That's even, there's a magnitude of more houses that are accessing that area. If you look at the intersection you have south in Clements there, it's a trail segment that looks just like this. And so this isn't an uncommon rural trail concept. And so we're definitely hoping that you'll consider our request. Now the frontage trail is just a third of a mile. That's the length of that trail. An 8-foot trail going through that frontage is a very long segment of trail. To pave it at 8 feet is it's going to be difficult to accomplish for several reasons, and that's just not us saying that. That's something that the folks building the other segment of the trail acknowledged. Bob was actually working over the last couple of years with the folks who were looking to build that trail, and he said, "Hey, I'll give you my land, here, and build a trail." And they started designing it, and what happened was, as you get further out here towards Marshall Canyon Road, it just gets super difficult. The grade is incredibly difficult, and I've got some pictures to show you here, but there's not a really good design for getting around that area. And there's not a lot of users past Bob's. Well, there's no users on our side of the road past Bob's adjacent 8-unit mobile home court. And so anyways, the folks who were designing that trail and looking into it stopped their plans and said, "Hey, we're just going to stop here. We're not going to go any further because of the complications that it creates." And so I can completely understand that, I like trails and I think they're a great amenity, but when you look at the ability for the residents here and the adjacent residents really at Grile Court to go into the common area and to make their way through their site and get onto that trail, I don't see not building a trail as an impediment. And it's going to be very difficult to build if we were required to do it. Here's that section of the road where it's going to be something significant's going to happen for it to ever get around to this corner. This is Marshall Grade, or the Marshall Canyon Road here. We have a creek and we have the river on the other side. That'll be a significant investment at which, and there's a power line there. I mean, it'll be a major undertaking that I'm not sure. It got bumped down the priority line, and I'm not sure how far it got bumped down, but it'll be a major trail at whenever time that goes in. And so we don't see it as something that's going to happen soon. And that being the case, we're optimistic that you'll understand why it's complicated for us to, if we have to do that would be a very difficult component of the project. Here's what that trail would be going through on our property. If you look at that, the right-of-way takes up all of the flat area, and then we go right into some significant mature trees. That's the path. We have a nice buffer from Highway 200 on our site of existing vegetation. That trail will go in and require a significant clearing of all that vegetation. There's varying grade in there, and it'll be difficult. Here's a picture of the picture on your on the left is kind of the existing entrance and where Pine Grove Road comes in. And you can see you get into that really vegetated area soon, some varying topography. And then I wanted to show you the picture on the right. That shows Bob's Grile Mobile Home Court, his adjacent property to the west there. And it shows how there is an existing grade here that a railroad grade that it basically functions as a trail right now, a gravel trail. It goes right through our common area. It'll provide sufficient, it has provided and will continue, it'll be in a common area. It has provided sufficient, the ability for people to get through the site. Bob's comfortable with letting everybody at Grile Court know, hey, this is a common area. We talked about putting in a wooden sign. We get a lot of these common areas out there, and if they don't put a sign in, who knows what it is, right? Unless you're a guy who can read plans and whatnot. But I know as a kid, if there was ever a wooden sign that said park on it, I was going to occupy that space. And so we talked about it and just to make it more of a known thing. And once that sign goes up, every kid in the area is going to know that's a park, and they're going to make their way through it. And so there is this existing grade and trail there, and we're just hopeful that you'll consider our variance regarding that. I just wanted to end again with the picture of Bob's Newcastle Court. This is what we're going for, and I'm just proud that I've got a client here who's done such a nice job on some existing projects I can show you. And so with that, I'll let Bob maybe say a couple things and take any questions from you.
Thanks, Paul. Yep. Mr. Grile, if you care to speak.
No, that's fine. Well, I'm Bob Grile, and nice to meet you folks. I guess what I'd like to say is a little history of why and what's going on in these places here. This court you're looking at right now, Newcastle, we built back at the late 90s. We had the property, we've had it for quite a few years, including this little piece we're looking at trying to do now. We've been raised, we grew up out in that neighborhood, this is our home. And if you ever go out and look at trailer parks around the area, you're going to find they're less than desirable most of the time. They're usually lined up side by side each other, tight spaces. And a lot of times there's problems with drugs and other things that go on. This is our home in our community. And we looked at originally developing these places and thinking, well, what if we put single family homes in there? And when you get involved with the Bonner community and what's really out there for folks and what they can afford, they can't afford a single family home. Most of those folks just don't have the wherewithal. That's why all the trailer parks out in this area. But when I looked at it, and my brother and I, we looked at it and we said, why can't we do something different that's desirable? Why can't we make something that's affordable and desirable and have people that live in our community come and want to be in this community? And we spent a long time looking, and we spent a lot of running around, and most of our time ended up over in the West Coast and basically in Bend, Oregon. And we saw this model over in Bend, Oregon. And what they did is what we did here. They took and they turned the homes like a regular home would sit against the street, not lined up in this trailer park mentality. They put carports on these homes, they let them build them, and they dressed it up, and they fixed it nice, and it made it desirable. And when I saw that, I thought, man, this would be something I wouldn't mind. If I had to go down and live into a home, why not? These are doubles and triple wide homes. They're nice homes. And in fact, my daughter lives in this court. She bought a home in it, and then we've got three manufactured home dealers that have personnel that actually bought into this court and put their homes in here because it's such a desirable place to live. If you ever have a chance to go out there and you follow Tamarack Road and you're going out to where the dam used to be, right on the right-hand side, or if you're getting off the freeway on the right-hand side in the trees, that's the court you're looking at over there. And what has happened over the years is we ended up We talked about the 55 and older and that type of situation. I said, no, we've got a lot of young families out here too. We want to make this something the whole community wants. And we took it before, at that time, the Water Development Group. They were real positive and gave us a lot of feedback and helped us some of the design on this. One of the things we found out over time is, although we have young families in there, we found out what ended up happening is we ended up with an awful lot of retired people that were coming out of the Condon, Cedar Lake, Superior area. They needed to get close to hospitals and access things. They needed to, but they wanted a nice place to live. Yet they were on fixed income, so they would sell their home, and they X amount of dollars off that home, say $250,000, $300,000 for their home. They go in here and they buy a home and put it in for $60,000, $70,000, and then they got a little nest egg left over. Allows them to have time to take care of their lives and maybe retired for a handful of years. People don't leave this court. They can if they want. We don't hold them there, but they don't leave. They retire there, and a lot of them are passing away in there. I wanted this court set up so when they had their home, it wasn't going to be something that they'd want to sell and move, or somebody buy and move. We wanted to be able to have them sell it in place if they wanted to move, and something desirable to go in. All these nice lawns and all the fixturing and all the maintenance on that, that's these people. They hang on themselves. They'll call their neighbors. Hey, your lawn needs mowing. They get on each other about it all the time. It's a real nice community. They have picnics in the summertime. They organize get-togethers. They've got Christmas parties they're doing together. It's a real fun little place to live. We're trying to duplicate that. That's what we're trying to do in the same situation we've got out in front of our other place. One of the things that was mentioned earlier about the sidewalk and the raised one, I actually went over to Newcastle and I talked to some of the folks about it. I asked them, I said, they're looking at doing this over here. What would you think about that if we'd had this raised? What would it have been? I've got I think I have two people in wheelchairs. We've got several walkers. We've got a lot of canes, and none of them wanted anything to do with a raised sidewalk because they get off and they go see their neighbor. They just walk across the street. They walk over here, walk over there. If they had the raised sidewalk, they're afraid of that extra step. They don't like that, catching them off guard. That was the comments I got on it. The other thing was the reason we wanted it down is because it's a lot easier for maintenance in the wintertime. When we have the plow trucks go through, we can keep that whole thing cleared off, including the sidewalks at the same time. If it's raised and the people have to start taking care of themselves, or we have to try and get on top of it, we've always got that little hump or bump that's going to be tough to get off and over and cross over on. So those were the things that we talked about with these folks. And then the snow removal itself, we're pretty good about trying to get it back into the lawns and out of their stuff, and we take care of all their driveways to keep those open. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on it. That was the main concern. Now, the other thing on this too is we live in this neighborhood. This is where Tom and I also live. Tom's house is just right below where this development's going in, right next to it, and mine sits just east of it a little bit off. But we're all in that same. My son lives out there. He's also right next to the same development. So we're trying to build something that's going to be we're proud of and we want to be a part of for the rest of our lives. And hopefully people move in and love this place. I really do encourage you, if you ever have a chance to run by, if nothing out of curiosity, pull in there. I've never had anybody that doesn't go through there to say, wow, that's the nicest park I've ever seen. And it is in western Montana. I'll tell you right now, I'll hold it up against anybody. But the real plus on this is a lot of the home parks in this town are right now putting their prices up to about $400 a month rent on this. We've held this one at $355, and we're trying to hold it for as long as we can. As long as we don't get too much cost involved, we can do it. Taxes go up, things happen, garbages. I mean, you add a little bit once in a while onto this thing to cover it, but we wanted to keep it affordable. Hopefully, we're going to do the same thing in this next one. If we get too much infrastructure oversized into this thing, we start building into it too many bells and whistles that really aren't necessary, then these prices go up, and pretty soon these folks can't afford it. All at once, we're out of the position, and now they've got to go out and compete in the rural market again for the single-family homes, and they're not able to. And we're trying to give them something that they're proud to come home to. And I'm telling you, every one of these folks are happy living there. They're just really happy. And there again, if you have a chance to talk to them, they'll tell you they're real happy to live there. I keep looking at the picture because I keep thinking about what else I know about this court. I don't know if there's anything else to talk about. Tom, you think anything else on it? That's it. Well, that's our vision, folks. We want a nice place, and just because you live in a trailer park doesn't mean it has to be a dump. And I think we can do it, but there's ways of doing it, and this model's worked really well, and we'd really like to hold as close to this model as we can to try and keep it affordable and keep people coming in and have more. And maybe this will grow. I'm hoping we'll see more people do this. We need affordable housing, and this is one way to do it and yet make it nice. They each got about a quarter-acre space on those lots, so they have room. If there any other questions or anything, Oh, just real quick, all those little roads that go off the sides, they're all common. So at the end of those, these folks all go out, like on this one, they happen to have access out to the river, and they walk along the banks, and they've got park benches they put out there and stuff. They all have access to everybody's place to go around. They're very cordial. Everybody's really common about, or careful about not interfering with other people's stuff, but they do mingle, and it's really nice to see the neighborhood being neighbors again. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grau. Any public comment on this item? Yes, ma'am. Come on up to the microphone and spell your name, if you would.
My name is Charlene Flippo. Do you want
Sure.
to spell the whole thing? Is that what you said?
Oh, just your last name.
Okay. Phlypo.
Thank you.
My one concern is, I'm an adjacent property owner. My one concern is the realignment of Pine Grove Lane, which will interfere with where I park my cars. I have a picture of my house and a picture of the cars. And it's hard to tell from this map how far out that's going to be. You know, I don't know how much I'm going to have in front of my house. So I will be parking on the street, basically. And you have a letter there from me too, so. Anyways, do you want to see the pictures? That's one thing that concerns me the most. Because the whole road will come towards my house. That's what I really I can't, determine that from this little map.
And we can address those after we close the public hearing. But ma'am, if you have any additional comments on this item, feel free to share. If not,
No, that's my one concern.
okay. Thank you. Any additional public comment? Sir, you're the only member of the public here. No pressure. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open this up to comments and questions from planning board members. Does anybody want to start it off? Helen?
Okay, well, I have several comments and several questions, and I guess first to start, I'll say, Mr. Greil, I really commend your effort to build a nice place for people to live. I think you're absolutely right. Just because it's a trailer court, it doesn't have to be a dump. And I actually have gone out and visited your project site. I was out there on Sunday and I walked around and I saw Charlene's house and I, wandered the neighborhood. So it's a kind of an interesting and unique little spot. You have a lot of mature trees on that property, and I see from your other trailer court that that's important. So I would encourage you to keep as much of that shade as possible, because that is pretty unique to that spot of the river. My main concern, or one of my main concerns that I'm having here is, you were talking about how in this other court, people didn't want the raised sidewalk because, there was potentially some usability or safety issues, which I understand. However, this specific site has its own unique challenges. One of them being parking. I was out there on Sunday and there were like hundreds of cars parked along Tamarack Road and Pine Grove because that's where there's river access. And so I can envision what the staff are saying, that, if you just stripe a line down the road, people are going to park there. Now, unless you're going to have parking enforcement or aggressive signage or a gate or, I mean, it's just going to be a bottleneck. And so, yeah, please, that would be great. If you can come up to the mic for the record, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things we were hoping, we've been asking for a long time, is that the county along Tamarack would put a no parking sign along that side. We're not asking no parking on all of Tamarack. We're just asking on the side that goes along the court, from there all the way down to the river, that we'd have a no parking sign on that side. Two things are happening. Not what you're mentioning. See, I live off of Tamarack. I'm one of those homes that get affected by this, and we do have signage up, and we do have to patrol it, and that's what we'd have to do on this situation. Is what we've done on the others. We had to put signage up, and we go in and keep people out. It's really a pain in the rear end for about 2.5 months out of the year. We really have a problem with it. We've asked the county to run signage down that side, down Tamarack, on the one side. Now, I noticed this weekend that the sheriff department and the fire department came out with their truck, and they were trying to get through. It's single passage only right now on Tamarack. You can only get one car down the center. If somebody's coming at you, everybody has to try and hope that they can find a hole or into one of our roads or something to get out of the way so the other cars can come by. If they just would get the signage up on the one side, it would leave plenty of room for people to have double passing. It would keep everybody on the state side of the ground where the state highway and the state roads right of way is, and they'd still be able to go in and use that. I was hoping the new public park system would eliminate a lot of that, but it doesn't seem to have made a dent on it. I don't know if people don't know about it, or their hours are what throws them off, or what's going on, but I do believe that could be addressed in that manner. And as far as the problems right now, that's how we're doing it. We're just what you mentioned. The parking is something we have to take care of, and we do have signage, and we're taking care of Pine Grove Lane right now, Juniper Drive coming in there. We've had people go into Newcastle Court and try to park and do it. Now, as far as the trail system out in front, too, I wanted to mention that to you also. I forgot to do that. We tried really hard the last 2 years when this new trail came in off of the other end. We tried to get that trail to extend on. We got 5 Valley Land Trust involved, the State Highway Department, and the county was involved with it. And they went through and they made applications. They've been trying to get this thing to continue on. I got the neighbor. I never dreamt I'd get the neighbor to go along with us to help form an easement to allow the trail in, but he agreed that if we could get approval on it, he would allow it. So we thought maybe we had a shot at doing this. When it didn't go through and that line happened, when it broke it, I mean, they just flat out said there's no way they're going to build that now, and they don't see it in the foreseeable future. It kind of shot it all to heck, the whole point of the trail. And right now it's a trail that goes nowhere. I mean, it leads to nothing. What we've got from Tamarack on handles the little places we're going to put in, and the community, the people across the street from us. But if you look at that picture again, there's nothing all the way down there for a long ways. There's nobody living down there. So it's just a trail to nowhere. It's a bridge to nowhere at this stage. That's why I offered, instead of building the trail at this time, funding could have been available if they could have got through that part. If they ever do get that figured out down that end, we're happy to donate the property to it to get that trail through. We'd like to see it, because then we'd have a continual trail all the way through to East Missoula. But right now, it just doesn't make any sense. And for me to put this cost onto the people, we're trying to put 1/3 of a mile of trail is an awful lot. We thought we maybe get some of that funded going the other way, and they thought they could do it, but that was the only way we were looking at making it work. This could be a deal breaker for us a little bit, this trail system, if we can't figure it out. If I had a short piece of property and the long part went the other way, it wouldn't be that big a deal, but we're just looking at a long stretch. Sorry, I got off track a little bit, but I hope I answered your question on the...
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Additional comments and questions? Andy?
I want to echo a number of things Helen said. I think it is a good layout. I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, we're on the trail topic. I had a comment, so I'll stay on that right now to try to stay focused. But it seems like to me, and I understand and appreciate the cost, what seems kind of just as a common sense approach to me is it seems odd why we need to have an 8-foot trail next to the 24-foot road. It seems like that is a model that's fine. It could be striped, provide delineation. And if there's a variance needed, that variance could be supported. And if there was any trail that gets any benefit, I would almost say lay the asphalt, the 8-foot trail along the front of the road and not along adjacent to the interior road. And you could create a loop and a circular pattern in here that kids and things could probably enjoy. This piece of trail may provide access to the east, but it seems like to me a trail laid along Highway 200 has more public benefit and future value than another internal trail next to a 24-foot paved road that's got minor vehicular access, and kids and all that will use that existing road. It preserves space in there, it preserves the trees. I know there's some trees, and Paul, you should put up that slide in there. I just roughly scaled it off. I don't think there would be too many trees lost along the front of Highway 200 to get the trail in there. I just used even a 30 scale in that 25-foot easement. No doubt there's probably a few trees, but I think it's pretty minimal that would be lost along 200. Looks like you're proposing a visual buffer there as well as a replacement. So I don't know, I'm kind of upside down in the recommendation from staff with regards to which trails should be approved and which should be denied. I'm reverse of that, honestly, in my opinion, and that maybe provides a little justification to why. I think there's instances where we see a simple stripe on a road being adequate in this kind of volume and kind of speed. There's other things that could be portrayed. I'm not a big, huge fan of them, but the speed bump or the speed hump, to try to slow traffic, but that has its own set of obstacles. I think trying to create a grade break in there without doing a curb and gutter is a problem. I don't think that's going to be very good long-term. I think it has a lot of issues with it, and trying to have a plain access in there for snow removal and trips and falls and stuff, it doesn't make sense to me to have an elevated trail. Trying to separate it by 6 inches and put an 8-foot asphalt strip adjacent to a 24-foot road.
Speaking of the interior pedestrian pathway, Casey, I'm looking at the variance request, and variance request number 1 talks about basically a conditional approval for that variance, subject to the condition of approval that's listed in that variance request, but I'm not seeing that same condition, I don't think, in the list of recommended conditions of subdivision approval. So the 2 pages I'm comparing are page 18, about a third of the way down, there's that condition of approval, and then I get into page 23, which has the conditions for the non-motorized facilities, and it's not in there. And I think it's probably supposed to be, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
It should have been re-highlighted in the master list of conditions found on page 23 under non-motorized facilities. Apologies on the oversight of mirroring that condition back into
no worries. So I guess
the master list. And
whatever motion gets made at the end here, we should just make sure that we are clear that the conditions of approval contained in the staff report, including the condition related to the variance for the interior pathway on page 18 or something like that, for whoever makes a main motion, just have that in mind.
Yeah, and while I'm up here on the trails topic, I just wanted to make sure it's clear, based on Andy's comment a moment ago, we're not recommending approval of one trail and not another trail. We're recommending that, by saying denial, we're recommending that both trails end up there. The first variance is approval of eliminating the boulevard requirement. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record.
It was clear in my mind, but maybe it wasn't others.
Okay,
My
yeah.
proposal would be is approval of a variance, but it would be for the elimination of a boulevard and a boulevard sidewalk.
Yep, gotcha.
And I would be more supportive of the recommendation of denial of the one along 200 and saying put a trail along 200, but not an approval of a variance to not put an interior trail.
Okay.
Because I don't know what that linear footage is, but it's close.
Yeah. All right.
Peter.
I'm not sure I understand the first question I have is, where do guests who come to visit the park?
So through their development covenants, they had proposed it along the shoulder of roads, and staff found that that doesn't comply with the road that they had proposed because they're proposing a no parking road. Subdivision regulations require one space per 10 mobile home units, which obviously isn't a very large amount. So that would be 3 parking spaces for the entire development, which is what we've recommended as a condition to mirror what's found in our Missoula County subdivision regulations.
Yeah, with the complication of a pedestrian trail next to the road and no parking, it seems like a no-win situation.
Yeah, which is part of the justification for some sort of delineation on that trail. I think there are provisions in the covenants which restrict guests from actually parking in the actual little spaces similar to what you see here, where like that truck would be parked. I believe there's restrictions on, you have to be like a permitted vehicle to park in the spaces, if I'm not mistaken.
The way those things work is, the best one's the one on the right, there you see in the picture of that home. There you see those cars sitting there by that carport. They've got a space, each of those have got 2 unit spaces. And when they put their carport on, they're allowed 2 more units in front of their own home. So they'll park inside their carports and their guests come out and park there. Then on the very beginning of that court, what we have is a parking area that we allow, also serves as the mail delivery area. But it's a large area, and I don't think we've got one in Pennsylvania right now, but there will be one in there that allows for more parking, so extra guests can come in. And then they have to come to us if they're gonna have long-term guests. So if they have somebody coming in that says, hey, we're gonna have a family that comes in for maybe a week or 2 weeks that are visiting, they're bringing a mobile home in, or, you know, an RV unit or something, they have to get permission from us to allow that. We usually do, because they're very conscientious, most of these folks, and it doesn't take up any place, any space on that. We find place for them to do that. So if you'll notice in that picture, you won't see anybody, very seldom if you see anybody park on that street right now or anything, and then you never do see much. The only thing is once in a while you see some delivery vehicle or something that pulls over that will be parked on the street, but very seldom you ever see anybody parked on that street.
Mr. Grell, I didn't want to interrupt you during your response. If you do me a favor and just come up and any answers to questions, if you could just put them on the record, I'd appreciate it. No problem. I didn't. You were in the process of explaining. I didn't want to interrupt you, but going forward. Additional questions?
I guess one of the concerns, and you know, this proposal, there is these areas delineated on the site plan, these 24 by some pads, and I don't know if that was the intention, that that's some parking spots. But if it's not, I think there's ample space on this property for overflow parking and could be integrated into bulb outs or other areas along the roadway here to provide ample parking that's far and above would exceed any parking necessity of the project, in my opinion.
I have another question, which is maybe not appropriate for this, but is the technology for winterization of a mobile home better than it used to be? You have the water pipes and the drain pipes coming up from the gravel underneath, and then just a skirt coming around it. My experience with older homes is that a good winter freeze, and I mean a cold snap, and they all freeze up.
You'll get your steps in at least.
Yes, actually, they have improved quite a bit. One of the things, now they still heat tape. They do that, and they do insulation around those tapes. Those tapes now come, most of those will come with a 25-year warranty on them. So they last quite a while on it. And these folks here, every October, we always remind them to do a heat tape check on everything they have underneath their homes. So it's just a flyer that comes out to them, and there's little services that come. There's a guy that comes out and actually just runs under for the older folks that can't do their own. They'll look underneath there real quick and just do a heat tape check on them. So yeah, and you do have a freeze up once in a while. Usually it's somebody that's left their home, gone on vacation for a while, and the power went out. Something happened, and that's where it occurs. But it's also designed so that it's always tried to be minimized underneath the home itself. A lot of that stuff's all insulated inside. So if their furnaces are on inside their homes, the homes are okay. It's usually something that's broke off from the home down below in that 3-4 foot range.
Thank you.
That's fine. You bet.
Vince.
Yeah, I have a question for Casey. The pedestrian trail requirement, is that county-wide? It's sort of new news to me that the requirement isn't for like a grade-separated walking path. Is that right, or am I misunderstanding the requirement? Like,
So there's a requirement for pedestrian facilities with a major subdivision request. So any minor subdivision requests which don't come in front of planning board don't have them unless the developer chooses to put one in. But there is that requirement that I had that shot of where with a major subdivision, they could propose with their roads serving their development, either 2 5-foot sidewalks on each side, boulevard sidewalks, or 1 8-foot sidewalk with the boulevard there. So generally, they're not per se raised, but you would have like a curb and gutter situation, to a boulevard, to a sidewalk, more of, I guess, your conventional subdivision that you might picture where there is that separation there. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I mean, it just seems highly unusual. I mean, I don't think a walking path that's at the same grade as a roadway that would meet any standards for safety. It seems highly unusual, but I think in this case, I don't object to it too much because this is a neighborhood street that's going to serve 24 houses. So the rules, I think, of what's appropriate are a little bit different than what you'd think of in another kind of subdivision where you'd have more through traffic or in a more urban environment. And Andy, you might have a comment on my suggestion. Yeah,
I want you to finish first.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, when I'm done, I'd like to hear you. I have to think about that. So I guess I don't object to it too much here. It's sort of a strange rule to me generally countywide. I would point out one thing that wasn't in here. So Mountain Line does stop. The Route 4 stops at the northeast or northwest corner here along 200, the outbound route. And so I'm thinking about how people are going to use this site and walk around this site. And I think we have to expect that people are going to be walking, people of all ages, 12 months a year to get to that bus stop. So I think I'm supportive of the county's position to require the walking path for that reason. I kind of like to see, I see on the southern part of the site, they kind of wrap around the pedestrian trail to meet Highway 200, but they don't do the same on the northern part of the site where the bus stop is. People are going to be walking on the side of Tamarack Road to access the bus stop. That doesn't seem ideal. I know the property line ends there, and it might be more difficult to do something there. Yeah. So that's what you're saying? Yep, right there. Yeah. Well, along 200. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm very sympathetic to the developers. I think it's great that you're trying to build quality homes at an affordable price for people, particularly that live in the neighborhood. I just don't think it can really come personally at the expense of people's safety and walking, capabilities for walking. One thing I noticed, 24 feet wide seems kind of wide as well. If there's anywhere to cut here, I would almost be supportive of reducing the road width. 12 feet is, the width of some lanes on highways. There's plenty of neighborhood streets that get by with 10 feet of width. I think would actually, particularly with a at-grade walking facility, reducing speed or encouraging slower speed vehicles would actually be a benefit here. So those are my only comments. Andy, if you have any response to some of those things, that I'd appreciate it.
I agree. I think the pedestrian circulation is good. I think one of the things to keep in mind here is it's a one-lot subdivision, and it's got a requirement to construct sidewalk, if you will, sort of along the frontage, and that frontage along 200 would, to some degree in my mind, meet that. The proposal I would float is I don't think I'm taking away the safety or the circulation of the pedestrian movement and actually creating a more circular path and just transferring that chunk of asphalt to another location to get more bang for the buck, if you will. The 20-foot clear zone is a common requirement for public safety, for fire trucks and access, and I think preservation of that 20-foot clear is important. But the striping of a 4-foot shoulder for a pedestrian access is not uncommon to see on the same plane and done with a stripe at this kind of level. The city just constructed a trail up Grant Creek and found that adequate to do on the old Grant Creek Road, a small residential subdivision, quiet neighborhood. And what I find most interesting about that, there was already an existing trail in that neighborhood. And rather than utilize that trail, the city project came in and run a stripe down the existing road and now largely impairs traffic because it's got so narrow in there because of this stripe that no one really preserves the stripe or recommends or acknowledges it, because the stripe created an infringement on the roadway travel when there was a trail and a boulevard adjacent to it, which made no sense to me. So I'm just saying, I think it is important. I think creating a grade separation on there will provide very little pedestrian safety, probably promotes more slips, trips, and falls and twisted ankles from someone walking her down and not noticing some undelineated change in grade. And 6 inches grade, I mean, we go around milling sidewalks when they got a quarter or half inch of grade change on them for, and so I'm concerned having an adjacent trail that's 6 inches above for pedestrian safety could do just the opposite of that. And rather, I think there's more public benefit in the trail along the Highway 200 where you could create a circular. That section down by Unit 14, I see what you're saying, and I assume that's where the bus stop is most appropriate because of the intersection with Tamarack. So I'm sure there could be some consideration to say maybe there needs to be a little connector trail along the inside of that to make that connection. But with the connection of the roadway on 200 and coming around, and if there was a little short trail going up the side over along Unit 14, you could complete a total circular movement in this deal. And with the layout and it not being private property and they're renting a space, I think you're going to find there's lots of internal circulation where people are creating their own pathways. I mean, I've seen many instances where the best time to build a sidewalk is after you've let people use it for a number of years and you figure out where the sidewalks really need to go. Because you frequently see sidewalks constructed or parking lot designs and people cutting where they want to go. And so, I don't know, that's my point, I guess, to make.
Yeah, Andy, thanks for your comments. Could you, I guess I'm not totally clear on what you were suggesting. Were you suggesting to, have a 8-foot wide pedestrian trail at grade along to Highway 200 and then have a 24-foot wide street internally? Is that what you're saying?
My preference is to see a 24-foot road A with a 20-foot clear zone maintained for traffic, a stripe for preserving a 4-foot width for pedestrian access and movement, and then an 8-foot at grade or, following the natural contours, a meander trail, if you will, creating some visual interest and, along the 200 corridor. That would go from this approach at least, and I guess the difference, there is a fairly significant difference. I mean, there's even quite a bit of distance from that road to the east side of the property. And I know there's some concern about, where that trail goes to the west back to town. And I'm not sure, we haven't seen a map of where the trail network really is out there, and I don't know. But it seems like while there are some constraints going to the west, I think there's access to the east that might provide some movement where pedestrians want to go back to the town pump, to the intersection, to the state park, and that sort of thing. And I just feel like if they're going to have to spend some money, it would be better spent on a trail on 200 than another 8-foot asphalt, a wider road, a larger footprint, more trees to come out along that interior road A.
But you are suggesting keeping a 4-foot wide pedestrian trail internally?
Absolutely.
Okay.
On the 24-foot strip of pavement.
Oh, within the 24 feet?
It'll be a 20-foot travel lane,
okay.
4-foot pedestrian movement access.
Yeah, I actually like that a lot. With what I was saying about the width of the road seeming a little bit excessive for some really tiny neighborhood street. And 4 feet is, that's a minimum width for most sidewalks. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Preserve, a walking space for people that seems appropriately sized to me for the neighborhood, for the context.
So that just seems to me like we're proposing a variance for them. I mean, they haven't asked to vary from the width of the interior roadway. They haven't asked to vary from the width of the sidewalk. The only thing they don't want to do is build a boulevard, and the staff has proposed recommended approval of that variance so long as it's grade separated, but they don't have to build a. So I mean, I don't know, it seems like we're sort of trading on their behalf.
Well, I guess what we're
yeah, that is okay. Solutions, gotcha. Well, I mean, the solution too is to deny the variance for the pathway along 200 and require the sidewalk interior too, as recommended. I mean, I think that's the fullest build out of pedestrian facilities here. And it's required by the recommendations, and I'm sure that the applicant was told what was required on day one. And so nobody's surprised here at the public hearing of what was required. That's where I'm coming from. I mean, I agree with staff with respect to the condition of approval regarding the grade separated trail and the recommendation to approve the variance for the boulevard. And I also agree with staff to deny the variance to the pedestrian trail along 200. I mean, that's where I stand, but, and I don't know, I guess
I think what we're suggesting, John, I mean, to get to the brass tacks here would be maybe amending the conditions of approval for the variance of the 7-foot boulevard is essentially what we're suggesting, and trying to come up with conditions that seem to fit the site better. I mean, because the developer is asking for a variance, maybe have that
asking
wrong.
for what
Maybe
we
have
think
that
they
wrong.
should have, and what we think they should have is a non-standard road. Essentially, that's what we're kind of riffing on right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, Paul, you raised your hand. I want to give you a chance to address that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, Paul Forsting. That's funny that's the exact road that Bob wanted to build. That's what he built. The 20-foot road with 4-foot striped pedestrian areas is what was required in Newcastle Court, and that's what Bob wanted. We looked at it and said, hey, we can ask for. Let me take a step back. I really think there should be a separate set of regulations that address mobile homes. It makes it incredibly difficult. This is the highest level of standard. This is what some combination of what Canyon River's building for their, $600,000, $700,000 houses. We follow the same exact rule set as any new development. And if we're going to be serious about affordable housing, then we have to say that there are little exceptions here and there for how affordable housing is going to be accomplished. That's my personal opinion. We're here with the regulations. We've got approved hardship. I understand all that. Gosh, any pavement we can save is going to be going to be much appreciated. And so if you're saying, hey, we could do a 24-foot road surface that could accomplish, what Bob initially thought it could accomplish. And I said, hey, I remember the conversation. I was like, hey, we can't ask for variances from everything. As a rule, as a company, we don't like to ask for variances because then we're sitting here talking about variances and it jeopardizes the whole project. And John, you said, hey, they know the regulations are there. Bob's on, the project's on as close as it can be to being feasible and not. And so we just appreciate any consideration you have for, like what Vince is saying, a modified road if you think that pavement should go somewhere else.
Peter.
Okay, so Bob did a good job of convincing me that this could work. This could be something good for the community. And I came in here feeling the opposite. I really didn't feel that this was going to be an option for the community that would be good for the community or the individuals who are here. I'm not interested particularly in trying to make this work economically for this group. I'm much more interested in seeing that people, the community and the individuals who might like to live in a place like this, that it's a viable alternative for them. I'm imagining an 85-year-old woman who is living in a home and can't drive to the hospital but needs to get there, having to make her way to the corner of Tamarack and 200 to catch a bus in the middle of January. Or she can call the ambulance. Wouldn't she be better off living downtown somewhere? So I don't have a lot of desire to see this go forward, but at the same time I feel like I don't have a lot of reason for refusing it or considering reasons why it shouldn't work. I'm all for it. I think that you've got there are good motives for trying to make this work. I'm a little concerned about the water. I'm find it hard to believe that 2 wells can provide both enough water for 25 homes, irrigation, and a fire deterrent system. But I'm willing to believe that the people who have looked at that have gotten there. I guess I'll stop there.
Helen? Oh, Stephanie, I'm sorry.
So I would like to return to this idea of the road size, just to present an idea that I don't know, I would like to think about the advantages that might be to having the narrower road. Because I think of the example that you gave of Clements and those roads out by Maclay Bridge and how it gets really crowded when there's an 8-foot shoulder. And the only reason that people don't park out by Maclay Bridge is because they routinely tow people who do that. And so I'm wondering if having the 4-foot shoulder would, I mean, that's not the size of a car. It's going to show people that that is a walkway. And then the other reason, I guess my other thought is that a narrower street necessarily restricts the speed of traffic as well. And so I do think that there's actually a potential advantage to pedestrians by making that a smaller, sort of noticeably smaller, slower street. That being said, I feel very strongly that there shouldn't, the denial of variance for the thing along 200 needs to go forward. I think it's very important that we connect that for public good, for pedestrian reasons, for both people living in there and people living in the community. So I'm willing to consider something different about the interior road. I don't necessarily see the need to have a grade change as long as there is clear striping and that's part of the conditions of it, which I was a little bit unclear as to whether you are just saying that you're going to stripe it or whether there's actually a condition that that will be striped and that no parking signs will go up, because I think that that's important. But I do think that that pavement or that trail along 200 is really important as part of this development.
Helen?
I agree with a lot of what's been said today, and I particularly like Andy's kind of creative problem solving, and so I would be supportive of an amendment to the variance in that sense. I wanted to change the subject a little bit, and I don't know if we're ready to do that, but I wanted to talk a little bit about wastewater management. So, Peter, you just brought up, well service. I'm assuming the county and the engineers will take care of that, but this site is super close to the river, and we are looking at a little bit of a higher density here from what is currently there. And I think the neighbors' concerns about what are going to be the impacts to other systems surrounding this neighborhood are, I think those are legitimate concerns. And so, Paul, I don't know if you could speak a little bit to why this specific wastewater treatment system was chosen, why you're not going with maybe a higher quality system like some of the ones that we've used or seen come through for Blue Mountain, for example. I understand they're a little more expensive, but you were able to put in more units, et cetera. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a different system here than Blue Mountain. That's absolutely correct. This is a level 2 treatment system, so it's in that same magnitude of capabilities of treatment. It's just the application here for 25 houses doesn't match what you would do. The SPR is a design that our company is responsible for in a certain aspect. That's a kind of waste. They're all proprietary systems. Andy works for a firm, and they probably do some kind of designs too. But a level 2 system is very similar to that system out at Blue Mountain. These are. Level 2 means everything. It's above level 1, and level one is essentially up to a pressurized drain field design, but down to just a standard septic system. A level 2 system has a secondary treatment unit in it, which this will have. This will likely be in an Eliminite system or an Advantix. Those are really the two primary ones, and those are third-party specialized components of it. And so this will do a very high level of treatment. It'll have a treatment pod in there, and that'll create a high level of nitrogen reduction. Not as high as Peak and Blue Mountain, but that type of unit is very special, and we only see those being put in at even something that maybe double the flow of this, or where you really have a concern with existing nitrogen in the water, and we don't have that here. Out at peak, and they're finding in that area, in that groundwater, they find it 10, 15. I mean, the nitrogen's very, very high for what the state and EPA will allow for you. When you have something like that, they don't want you coming and adding more. Here in this case, we don't simply have that condition. But that being said, these are very expensive, nice systems. This discharge permit that goes with it, because we have a discharge permit, the system itself has to be re-reviewed every 5 years for the rest of its life. It's a significant cost. At that time, the standards themselves are raised. We'll see systems that have to treat, they'll have a nitrogen removal standard of maybe 48, and then that was dropped to 24. And that's a really hard standard, but that's something that the state can do with these discharge permits. They can say, okay, you have to re-up, now you have to meet a new standard. And so that's something that will be ongoing forever. And so when we look at it, they're certainly not doing, they're not doing a cheap option here, and they're not, I don't think it's all that inferior to what we have out at Blue Mountain. Yeah, I think it's, I hope others could speak to that. But.
Thank you, Paul. And I just want the rest of the planning board to know that, I was having conversations with Casey earlier about this issue, and I've been flirting with the idea of proposing a condition to the approval whereby if there's ever sewer extension to this area or some kind of community sewer option, that the subdivision would be required to connect to whatever that sewer infrastructure would be. And I hate to make that the linchpin for like a trailer court because, this is not the best example for that, or maybe it's not as urgent in this case, but, with expanding development in this area, we're going to have to start making some hard decisions about the planning future of this community. And so, everything out here is on septic and it's really close to the river, and that's very concerning. So I don't know if others would be in favor of that. Certainly something to think about.
Would doing that help the extension of sewer in the future to places to the east or west?
So I had an opportunity to speak with Commissioner Strohmeyer over the weekend about this project, and he suggested that any kind of recommendation or statement of support would definitely help move forward conversations about this. Obviously, he's not going to make any promises, but I think that if as a planning board, we talk about this and put forward maybe a recommendation to commission to consider this as an opportunity to build out infrastructure or begin the conversation or the research necessary to carry out this type of project. I think we should.
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at was. I don't know how this works, but if we anticipate that sewer might need to move across the property in the future as development occurs in the area, it seems like maybe an easement of some kind might be enable that. But I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly. I guess would that be a possibility? Do you think? Utilities needing to move across this property as development in the area occurs?
Condition of approval number 3, which is a fairly standard one, 22, has a notation on the plat similar to the RSID, not waiver, assent, excuse me, basically granting an easement to any public or private firm that needs one to provide utilities. So that
covers this.
Considered.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, regarding a condition, like do you have any kind of thoughts about the sort of tolerances of when it would be required? Like, is it within 500 feet of? I guess my question too would be, at what point is the most efficient connection of an existing community septic or community sewer system would the most efficient connection of that system to a public main, would that be like at the location of the drain field? This is kind of like sort of hypothetical, I guess, but I started to think about this. Okay, so you construct this system that's all connected up to the same sort of trunk, right, throughout the property. It all goes to the level 2 treatment system and everything like that. Would the most efficient place to connect that system to a public main in the future be at the location where it all collects headed? In theory it would, right? So would the condition say something like, you know, if a sewer main comes within, well, 500 feet is like, that's pretty intense.
Casey, didn't you say that that was the requirement, was 500 feet?
Yes, generally, if they're within 500 feet of the municipal system, they'd be required to connect unless there was some exemption that they could claim, like an extreme hardship.
And that's new development though, right? That's not just anybody.
Yeah, so that's
like the rattlesnake, right? There's tons of people on septic up there, but the second they go try and do something, they have to connect. It's sort of like the trigger.
In the city, it's upon sale. They can require it, but that's a city ordinance. In the county, it would be if they were going to double the number of units in here and needed a new system, or, you know, I don't know totally if that system like failed, if they would have to connect if there was a sewer line out there in 200. Paul may know right offhand, but I did look a little bit into just where the sewer connections, the closest ones are. They are over in Canyon River, as the crow flies would be the closest. That's obviously, you have a river to get across before you get there. There was a preliminary engineering report done in 2016 by Missoula County in conjunction with HDR. And at that point, when they were contemplating a handful of different options for this Bonner, West Riverside area, the connection to municipal city sewer was contemplated. That connection would have made it along Highway 200. Obviously, a pretty substantial run from all the way at the top of the grade in East Missoula down following Highway 200. There's some right-of-way issues. The river, as we've all seen this year more than ever, is starting to move a little bit, and I think MDT may have some concerns out there around that corner that there's just not a lot of right-of-way to work with at this point. So trying to put, you know, really expensive utility lines through there at this point in time may not be the best idea. It was an extremely expensive endeavor in the long run. The report recommended sort of a localized system out in this area. So, you know, making a condition may be a little difficult here because we don't know what system we're talking about. I think, and kind of a current planning perspective, you know, we have to look at this area as it doesn't have sewer. You know, we don't know which side it would come from and who's in control of the system. Is it its own district? Is it managed by the city? You know, where is it coming from? You know, what we can look at is this is a public system that they're proposing on site. It's, you know, certainly looked at much more favorably than individual septic systems that you might find with single family lots. You know, you have, you know, one point, source point for water, one, you know, resting place for all the wastewater. So with that, staff felt that, you know, they are doing their, you know, what they're required to from health department DEQ regulations to get this system permitted, and that, you know, based on the information they've provided in our, you know, kind of oversight review of it, obviously it'll go through a full deep dive and sanitation and subdivision review to make sure all the pieces and parts are there, but that they're, you know, adequately, you know, mitigating their impacts to groundwater and, you know, surrounding development, that there's not going to be huge issues because they are proposing, you know, a nice public water or a public wastewater system here.
Does anybody know, I mean, Lolo is its own district. Lolo has its own water treatment facility.
Yep.
And if you develop presumably within the bounds of the district, you have to connect, I would imagine. I mean, I suppose, yeah, there could be some distance issues potentially if you're, but.
Yes.
I mean,
so there's districts, and then there's also, if you're within the district, which this is within the Missoula Wastewater Service Area District here, it encompasses the whole Milltown, Bonner area, similar to a lot of properties in Lolo. And then if you're within so many feet of the line, you're required to connect. Alternatively, people who are outside of that district can, you know, petition for some sort of annexation into the district, and then they have to, you know, still bring the line into the property. So there's a difference between the district and the connection. You know, you have to have both of those to truly, you know, have a functioning unit there connected to it.
And so was HDR, given the constraints of running the main out 200 up against the kind of the slope and between the slope and the river, was HDR's conclusion, you said that it made more sense to do kind of a localized, like a system that serves Bonner, Milltown, West Riverside?
That was their conclusion based on a lot of criteria, not based solely or necessarily on the Highway 200 constraint.
Right.
That factored into the decision. That, I mean, it was addressed in there that you have, I forget what the mileage distance is between the nearest line and where it needs to go to. I mean, and that is considering that this is the very edge of that Bonner Milltown area. That line has to keep going all the way to the east into, you know, the kind of the proper Bonner Milltown area. You know, there's another river to cross even over there, so, you know, that factored into it. There's a lot that plays into it. You know, the report was, you know, pretty high level, just kind of looking at, you know, what may be out there. And they did have a handful of public meetings that accompanied that and took community feedback. And, you know, they ended up with the conclusion that the best option at that point in time, based on the information they had, was not necessarily to connect that line from Highway 200.
I appreciate what you've just shared with us, Casey, but I think it would be naive to think that we're not going to have some kind of centralized sewer water treatment facility of some kind in the Bonner Milltown West Side area eventually. You're right. We don't know what that is. You know, it may be unwise on our behalf to put conditions based on an unknowable, but you know, with kind of the rising amount of development as well as all of the commercial and manufacturing that's going on out there, I really think it's just a matter of time. And it, you know, impetus might come from Kettle House, it might come from the amphitheater, it might come from the locals, I don't know, right? But it's going to happen. And so I just want to make sure that as we're moving forward, the message is, you know, these developments can be done responsibly, and given the opportunity, they should connect to sewer.
Andy.
So I had two primary. One was the roads, and hopefully we'll circle back on that. The other was sanitation. And I have another question about that, but since we're kind of on this topic, I think it's good to keep thoughts kind of together. There's a number of things that I've seen out there imposed on the requirements of sewer. And there's a number of different things. It depends on where you are in regulations and what you're doing. I've seen instances where projects or conditions that says you're going to connect to within 180 days of sewer being made available. Typically being made available is a lot of times considered 200 feet in the plumbing code. If you're going through subdivision review, they have another threshold in there when you're doing subdivision review that if it's available, it's within 500 feet. You have to get permission or find out why you don't need to connect, and that's typically associated with cost. If you show it's more than 3 times the cost to connect, you can potentially avoid a connection. But there is conditions in here. One of the things that they're laying is a gateway to that connection to a centralized sewer system, whatever that may be, whether it's a satellite system or a connection back through a lift station or other means. And it's kind of addressed, which is a little interesting. It says actually it refers to the plat in the recommended conditions of approval, which I'm not sure if the word plat should be there now or how that's addressed. But condition 2 specifically sort of addresses this and seems like if there's concern, I don't know why it wouldn't just be of a community or municipal water system or sewer system. But condition only 2 only addresses a municipal sewer or system for fire. So I don't know if there's going to be a plat filed and where this condition is going to show. I'm a little confused in that process because it is a little untraditional, not a subdivision plat. You refer to it as a plan. So I don't know if they file a plan and if this language you're suggesting gets put on the plan that's recorded. Is the plan a recorded document?
It does. It reflects the same way as a plat would, is my understanding of how it flows through the clerk and recorder's office.
Something that condition right there could be simply amended to say at least whenever something is figured out, at least they have waived their right to protest that infrastructure and not participate in that project. And there's, like I say, plumbing code and other things. I've seen it where it just says you're going to connect. I've seen it's hinged upon when the system might fail. So rather than issuing a replacement septic system, they would have to connect if it's made available. This system is a high-end system. It's highly regulated under the discharge permit. So there is a lot of checks and balances going on that, is going to require monthly inspection, monthly testing, and they're pretty rigorous permits. And every 5 years they do have to renew them. So, with the infrastructure that's in place, possibly an amendment to this recommended condition saying provisions for a sewer system, that they could maybe protect that, might be a means to kind of lay some groundwork for that, for protection or concern. I do have one other question, and that was this, I'm a little confused in where the DEQ process is, and maybe, Paul, maybe you could clarify that. It seems to be inferences made that there's approval, but that approval is from 2000, and the discharge permit has expired, but I know frequently they expire and they grant you an extension, but it takes them 18 months to issue it. I didn't see any dialogue in the DEQ that says we've extended your permit. Also, the DEQ approval that I think you're referring to as a 2000 approval with a 3-year requirement to install, or it expires. So it seems to me your approval process needs to start virtually at square one, with the exception maybe of the discharge permit.
Correct.
A slight question I have, or concern I have, and I hope you're successful in this, but I'm concerned about your 300-foot mixing zone. That gives me a great concern that you're going to be successful with that. I don't know, and I don't know how far you're down that road, but.
Right. One thing that hasn't been emphasized probably enough, that this project was approved as a subdivision or as a mobile home court 2000 or even probably earlier than that, because there was a DEQ approval in 2000. So that something that you normally probably hear a lot when you're talking about approving a subdivision is that the same, very similar product was approved on the site. It had been through review and was approved. And yes, at that same time, there was a DEQ approval. The COSA was approved and the discharge permit was approved. The discharge permit has been continued to be approved or extended. So it is in place. It is extended and approved. I think it's approved for 8,750 gallons. Nowadays, I think the system only, would say that you would require 6,200 or something.
I was getting a lower flow than that.
Yeah, lower. And then we've actually, on Bob's other system, or on Newcastle, we've actually put an electric monitor in there and seen it to be well below 5,000. So we're really triple maybe double something what it was approved for. We have to get through all of those approvals. And as part of review, they actually make a consideration is, will there be sewer in the area? And if so, then let's talk about possible ways to make it easy to connect. And so it is something that is contemplated, and we do have a whole review process looking forward to get through.
And sometimes the issuance of the septic permit may require a deed restriction or something be placed too. And I've seen them, and if you're in the MWIPSA, I think that when they issue a septic permit, they're going to require a deed restriction.
We certainly aren't going to be the only entity very focused on septic and water and sewer. There's going to be a very, very ringer. We've had some initial approvals that the discharge permit is the only thing that's still active, but we still have to go through rigorous permitting on it. We have to make sure everything fits. We're not going to build a system that was designed back in 2000. We're going to build a system designed today to meet all the standards. Okay. And we've looked at it, and we've even done some initial feasibility with Bob. Before we get here, we always want to make sure that we don't want to walk away with an approval with the system that can't be built. So we look at it to the extent where we think it's feasible.
Okay. Good. Yeah. I wanted to clarify. It looked to me like that old shelved approval, I think you get to pay fees and start over.
Yeah. So.
Additional questions and comments? No? Are we done? Are we done? Well, I think just overall, just to state my own position, I think I have with respect to the variances. I agree with you, Mr. Gryle, that this is a housing type. When I looked at this the other day for the first time, looked through some of the materials, my thought was this is a housing type that's needed, and it's rapidly disappearing from the city of Missoula. It needs to be somewhere. And I appreciate your philosophy in building this sort of court. I think it's a great thing. So, that being said, like I said, I have my positions on variances, but at the end of the day, I'll be, voting to recommend approval of this project. So, Andy.
So I get a little confused in the regulations, and maybe Casey or others could help us figure out, because I would be right on board with this with the slight modification that the proposal that is recommended for approval is it just says a variance from the 7-foot boulevard. And my thought would just be, say, and 8-foot boulevard sidewalks be approved. I've seen subdivisions come through this planning board where variances weren't even in the application. Staff prepared a variance and submitted and was approved, or variances could be brought forward after the planning board, I think, to go before the commissioners. So I'm not a procedural expert on this, but I think if the concept was there that we wanted to do this either through a modification of approval or a slight variation on the language in what we were voting on, it seems to me like it's not insurmountable. But I'm not an expert on that, and maybe Casey has opinion.
So, and my
that.
question too about that was, so is 24 foot wide road is the width that's called for in the subdivision regulations to serve this many units, correct?
Correct.
And then the options are either a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street or an 8-foot pathway on one side of the street.
Correct.
So a 24-foot with an 8-foot pathway it meets the regulations.
Correct, with a 7-foot boulevard.
With the 7-foot boulevard, right. So the variance to the boulevard, and then we're raising the grade. I guess, it just, for me, it kind of falls back to, this is a green field, and, the expense is not hardship. That's just sort of my take on things, but.
Yeah, and I'll just touch a little bit on procedures, what I foresee as the best way forward. Instead of recommending a modification of a condition of a variance approval to lessen the request that's on the table, would be to alternatively kind of amend the variance request and make findings associated with that variance request. Whether it's amending the one that's there that relates to the trail already would probably be the easiest way. There's the handful of review criteria that are addressed in there, and if you feel that there's adequate findings to support that sort of amended variance request, you could make a condition to amend it, and then if there were conditions still attached to it, you could still go with that route as well.
So Casey, and again, just trying to make things the most streamlined, and again, I may be the only one to do this, but they have another variance already to vary on road widths. They just put it on Pine Grove, so why couldn't it be Pine Grove and Road A? Because the requirement was a 24-foot road, so I guess the secondary, which John brought up, is a good point. Variance A was about the boulevard and the sidewalk. Well, if variance A was just said a variance and recommend approval to delete the boulevard and to delete the sidewalk, and variance 3, if you will, was a variance from 24-foot road for Pine Grove and Road A, with a recommend of approval, recommend of denial of the Highway 200 variance, and a recommended approval of the subdivision with the conditions.
So their variance for Pine Grove is not to have a 24-foot road, it's to have a less than 24-foot road.
20 foot, correct. And, generally speaking, we try to keep the roads separate. If that came in as the original request, you could act differently on each one. It allows you a little more flexibility there. Alternatively, the commissioners as well, that way they don't have two road standards tied in one variance request, because Road A and Pine Grove Lane are going to function a little bit differently here. That way you're saying, we're varying from Road A requirements, if you chose to go that way, through a variance request. We're varying from Pine Grove Lane requirements through a variance request. I don't know ultimately what the feel is I've heard a few different ways here of whether you're trying to eliminate the pedestrian trail off Road A, or if you're trying to shrink it to 4 feet and also shrink the road to 20 feet.
Well, I don't know. I guess I thought I was pretty clear again, but my objective is to not eliminate pedestrian access on Road A, but put it into a 4-foot corridor on a 24-foot piece of black hot mix asphalt concrete, and I leave a 20-foot traveled lane. So I'm not proposing we would eliminate pedestrian access on Road A.
This would be like a 2-part variance to Road A. One would be related to pedestrian facilities, and that variance would be a variance from the boulevard requirement and a variance from the pedestrian pathway width. And so, there would be no grade separation. And then the other variance pertaining to Road A would be a variance to road width.
Which they already have proposed in here. It was just tied to Pine Grove, but It would also apply to Road
And
A.
I think what Casey's saying is we would need a separate variance, a 4th variance, because just for the sake of clarity, you'd want those two roads split out so that you could, vote on them separately.
And this just is where I guess I need help from others to figure out how you get it done. I don't know. I think to me, it makes sense. I'm not the expert in the variance in the process and what conditions versus a variance and order of operations and who needs to be on first, but I know I have seen instances where projects have came through, maybe by mistake, but they've came through with variances not even considered at planning board and went to the commissioners, didn't even get the public comment at this level. So I don't, maybe, if there was that recommendation, whether it's a condition or a modification, I'm not sure they couldn't submit a variance before going to commissioners. I don't know. I lack that expertise, so that's not my ballywag, and I don't know how to best propose it. But that's what I would like to propose tonight, to keep forward motion and something happening, and if it dies and no one's supportive of it, that's part of the process.
I mean, I could tell you personally why I'm supportive of the variance to the width on Pine Grove, but not on Road A. I mean, Road A is a road that serves this development, and in my opinion, when it's a green field and it can be built to standards, it should be built to standards. Pine Grove, from all I can tell, is a kind of a gratuitous road that serves property owners to the south of this that don't actually have any legal access. I mean, it seems to me that Mr. Greil is basically, out of the kindness of his heart, paving a road that he has no obligation to even honor. So yeah, I mean, the hardship is the fact that he's basically doing everybody a favor, and providing access to people who have no sort of skin in this game, technically speaking. But as far as Road A goes, I mean, I wouldn't support a variance to the width. I'm okay with the boulevard because of the grade separation, but I wouldn't support any further variances because they are fully capable with zero topographical constraints to build the road to standard.
And I can understand that. I guess the thing I don't know is, are we looking for hardship? Because I see hardship that arises at Board of Adjustment level versus variances, which can be supported for a lot of reasons. I don't know that economics can't be supporting of a variance, and saving of trees and other elements. Granted, there's plenty of room. We could go build a much larger road in here, but I'm not sure that we have to measure it against a, quote, hardship at this level. I mean, I think the regulations are general and they're broad, but whenever there's concerns about preservation of trees, economics, other factors into it, I'm not sure, again, not the expert, but I'm not sure that hardship is the play. I sat on the Board of Adjustments, and that's the term we use, but at a variance level in going through this, I'm not sure that that applies.
Well, yeah, then I would, go for it and craft the variance and have at it.
Andy, I would support something along these lines. I think the designs we've talked about, I don't think it's just about hardship. I mean, I think it's what's the best for the context of this site, and what's frustrating or disappointing is to see regulations that, and I know it is the regulations that I'm sort of objecting to, that apply across the board, but in this case, it doesn't seem like it's resulting in the best outcome for the site, and it's adding, in addition to adding additional cost to the developer. And I think it's important to sort of, for us to find these things, because development is expensive, and that's part of why, and these regulations that we have, to the extent that they add cost to development, I think it's worthwhile for us to look at ways in which they can be amended or something more flexible to better suit the needs really of everybody. And I think so yeah, Andy, if you can find a way to get a package of variances that would achieve that, I think it would be a good idea.
Well, I mean, I think as I look at this, and I don't know, Casey, I mean, I can make something and then make Casey's life a mess later, I suppose. I don't know. And that's not my intention, but I mean, with a couple slight modifications on the proposal laying in front of me, it seems like all I have to do is add a few words, and what I was trying to achieve is there. I don't know, procedurally, maybe that means I got to come back and do a planning board meeting again or submit a variance, and I guess that's up to Casey and the applicant to decide. And I don't know, maybe the applicant has some opinion, and maybe, they're a planner and I'm not, so I don't know, maybe that puts us all in a quandary that we don't want, and maybe they'd rather just have it like it is. I don't know.
Sure, I'll let the applicant come up in a moment if they'd like. Just to add a few more pieces here, if I can, to try and benefit this in any way. The standards set forth in the subdivision regulations have been vetted through, the proper planning board, county commissioners over time, and that's what's required of subdivisions, and it's based on the number of units, which is where that 24-foot comes from. I think, if you're recommending a variance to a lesser standard, you mentioned kind of what you're basing it on. I think you do need to make some strong findings as to where that number's coming from and why, how we're getting to that point, just to make sure that our bases are covered here. And that, I think that variance modification can come forward here tonight. We're not necessarily presenting new information. It's just, in context of reviewing what we have, you're kind of formulating this, newer way of looking at what's already on the table in front of us. So I think it can come forward with some modifications, however, you all settle on it. But, just keep in mind that those standards are there for all subdivisions, and, they were free to request a variance to that road from the get-go if they felt that 20 feet functioned, or 24 feet with the pedestrian trail would have functioned just fine. They're already bringing the request forward. It could have came forward. At that point, what more we would have got out of it is they would have, put a little more reasoning behind it in the application that then would have been, available for review over the course of, the past month or so that we've had this application. Paul, do you want to add?
All right. Paul Forsting. Well, I'm with you, Andy, that I've seen all sorts of different versions of projects come here and go different directions. I've been working on projects that have been approved both here and the commissioners, and then a variance has to show up somewhere. That didn't happen because some rule, some process was missed. One of these variances wasn't written by the applicant. One of these variances was written by Casey, and that's for Pine Grove Lane, and that's just the weird oddities of how these things shape up. I think if you look at it, and the way the rules are to be enforced and considered, and the review, the time it takes to get to this hearing, it takes, maybe about a year to get through an application of this size and to look at it and to say everything matches. Now, I've been to planning boards and they've came and they've said, this is what I want, and this is what we think is appropriate, and that's been memorialized in the staff report moving between here and the commissioners, and the commissioners can consider it also just like they're going to consider everything in the application. And so I do think there is a way to get there. I'm not here to tell you the exact precise best way to do it and if there's even a provision for it, but if that's the language, everybody agrees that that's what is appropriate, we would certainly appreciate that, and we would move forward confidently to the commissioners to discuss it and see what happens. So,
Andy.
Well, I think that being said, I'm willing to take a stab at something, and we'll see where it goes. I definitely am not in the business, and I want to be very clear. I'm not in the business to come in and redesign a subdivision. I think that is the absolute worst place to do it. I think these items were contentious. That's why they're on a variance. That's why they're on the radar. That's why we had public comment today to hear those things. And I think we're making minor tweaks at the end of the day. So I do think that, it seems like it ought to be in the process, and maybe it's a process that's similar to making sausage here, if you will. So it's not a perfect process, and so I'll do the best I can, and it'll live or die, I guess.
Helen?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that it's past 9 and we want to get started on our voting here, but I just had a quick question. I want to make sure that we answer the neighbor's question about how far the Pine Grove is going to, I guess, move down, or how the road is going to change in front of her house. Hers being one of the older homes in the area.
Well, we can see where it's going to be, and I don't have the exact offset. You can see there's a gap there between it, and if I understand it right, she's in these houses here. Her vehicles, you can see it on the aerial, and we can go back to it. I think I can find it. Maybe just to show you what I've seen, because I read the comment. To be frank with you, her vehicles overlap a little bit onto the site. You see them right there? And that's my understanding of what she's talking about, is that her vehicles here are on his site, and he's going to bring this road over here further. And so she recognizes that her vehicles may even, as they're currently parked, would overlap on the on where the new Pine Grove is going to be rerouted. And so if you can just mentally take a picture of these right here, and then I'll go back to here, and at least that kind of, I think, you know, shows it. And so, yeah, so we're talking about those, you know, those are like right in this area, if I'm getting this right. And so, you know, Bob's been more than willing to let her, to keep her, you know, it hasn't caused a problem. He doesn't have a fence there now. And so, you know, maybe they even will still fit, I guess, the way I see it. So I'm not sure.
And that part of the road is going to be paved, is that right?
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Paul, what's up with the landscaping there? Is the landscaping like separating access to people's homes there? Or?
You're required to have landscaping between mobile homes and residential.
Right.
And Bob wanted to do it anyways. He thinks it's nice. And
Right,
so-
but on the eastern part of the site.
Are you talking about the eastern part of the site right here?
Just right where we were looking. There's
Oh,
a
right
line
here.
of-
So this is where the road was.
Yeah.
This is where it's going. And so,
Oh, I see.
so there'll be a nice, I mean, there'll be a landscaped
I see.
buffer between that road and those neighbors.
Okay.
Yep.
I would
Go for it.
make a motion. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking my inclination is to make a motion to amend the variances on number 1 and 3, and I guess I could propose those individually and see if there's a second on that motion to amend those variance requests.
And then I think just to keep it clean, Casey's request is that there, instead of amending 3 to include Road A, we just do a 4th. And it can mirror variance number
Okay,
3.
if that would be a preference, then I could say that we would, so my thought is then I would make 3 motions to amend these proposed variances on, it would be 1, 3, and 3A, if you will. And if there's a second in support of that, then there would be a vote on the subdivision approval with conditions. So I would make a motion that we amend the proposal for a variance request from the requirements to construct a 7-foot boulevard and boulevard sidewalks for the on-site non-motorized pedestrian trail along Road A. So effectively, the amendment is just adding a variance to eliminate boulevard sidewalks and the boulevard is the effect of the amendment.
Okay, and then, is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Helen. Okay, we'll have discussion on the motion at this point. So with that change to the variance, that gets rid of the condition of approval that's under variance number 1 that we talked about earlier. We were going to have to make sure we remember to include in the conditions, final conditions of approval. Do we? Okay, so that's one component of, right? You said 3, so is the second component the 4-foot?
Wait, could you say that again? So what does this do?
So it would read just like it does, except it could just say variance from the 7-foot boulevard, and my proposal to amend would just say and boulevard sidewalks.
Okay, so we're not requiring any sidewalk.
And, right, that would be the proposed amendment or variance, and I would recommend approval of that
Okay.
to meet staff's conditions, but adding in the elimination of the variance from the boulevard and the sidewalk on the interior Road A.
Okay, and then just, were you contemplating, and if you said this, I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself, but are you contemplating another amendment to a variance to account for the 4-foot?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And if we
Okay.
need, and maybe to make it cohesive so that if someone couldn't support that, I could go on to say, I would also to recommend an amendment, actually an additional variance be proposed for a variance from road standard requirements to pave Road A to 20-foot in width, or 24-foot.
24-foot, yeah.
Let me think about this. 20-foot in width with a 4-foot pedestrian walkway striped on Road A.
So maybe the way that the first variance is amended is, you would suggest that the variance be from table 3.4.9.4, and the variance would be that rather than creating a 7-foot boulevard and an 8-foot sidewalk, you would create a 4-foot striping separated but at grade pedestrian pathway, right? Is that right?
I think so, yes.
So I think maybe the variance would be the same, but the 4 foot, you're creating a variance from the requirement for the 7-foot boulevard and the 8-foot sidewalk, but with the condition of approval that there's a 4 foot at grade, whatever we're calling it, pedestrian walkway.
Pedestrian walkway.
Right.
How's this shaping up from your perspective?
Maybe I could just take a stab at a reading here to
That
see
might
if
be-
I'm catching what you're putting down.
Okay.
The recommended motion would be that the request to vary from table 3.4.9.4 non-motorized standards to relieve the applicant from creating a 7-foot boulevard and, sorry, that does get confusing. I thought I had it. So we'd be relieving the applicant from creating a 7-foot boulevard and allowing for a 4-foot sidewalk along, at grade, along the vehicular traveled way of proposed Road A. And then no additional, I haven't heard anything about the condition with it yet, but I guess that's,
It sounds like it gets us there, yeah.
So would you like to adopt the language as Casey just stated it?
I think my intention is there.
Okay, and Helen, does your second still stand? Okay, so barring further discussion on that motion, are we comfortable voting on that, the motion to vary in the manner described by Casey? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No? Okay, I'm the one no, I think. So 6-1. Okay, and then maybe we move to condition? Following that? So the condition, I guess, would be similar to the condition that's under variance request number 1, except it says
What page are you on?
page 18. But this would be a condition in the non-motorized section of the conditions of approval, which begin on page 22.
I would suggest a condition along the lines of what Stephanie mentioned earlier, just requiring delineation.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's important. That's part of the purpose, is there's a delineation, a demarcation to create that separation.
Yeah.
So with the variance approved, then we would just need that condition if you want to make a motion to include that condition.
So you're talking conditions number,
so that was the condition that was shown with the variance request on page 18, but it wasn't, it was left off of the master list of conditions, so ultimately you could
so
just.
it's on page 18, but it should have been on page 23 or something?
Yeah, you could just make the recommendation to scratch the condition on page 18, and since it's not reflected on the master list, you could just add a new condition on of whatever you're looking for here, if that's the delineation, I believe is what I'm hearing.
Stephanie?
So would the condition then state something like the 4-inch or 4-foot wide asphalt or concrete surface sidewalk shall be delineated with striping?
That would do it, yep.
I would just like to say it ought to be 8-foot, or the 4-foot wide asphalt, not concrete, though.
Okay,
I think it ought to be similar material.
yeah, that makes sense.
You don't want a separation, I don't think, in material. I think the delineation and the stripe's adequate.
Okay. So the 4-foot wide asphalt surface shall be delineated with striping.
And strike the raised a minimum of 6 inches above.
I think we need to. So just for the sake of clarity, maybe I'll just go for moving for a condition of approval. So I move the inclusion of a condition of approval in the master conditions list requiring delineation of a 4-foot wide pathway at grade along Road A, the completion of which is subject to Community and Planning Services and Public Works review and approval prior to final plan approval. Seconded by Helen. Discussion on that motion? Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No? No? So 6-1 again.
Sorry, who was against that one?
I was.
You.
Okay. Keep going, Andy.
So if I look back at the recommendations, we would have a modified condition, recommendation on 1. Recommend denial of condition variance 2 for the Highway 200 trail. we would leave condition variance 3 alone,
Yep.
I think, and approve that. Recommend an additional one be added, a variance for reduction in the roadway width for Road A to a 20-foot width. And then I would be supportive of recommendation with approval in those conditions. So
So with regard to, I'm just trying to think, I mean, this is maybe in the weeds procedurally, but do we need to vote to include the variance and then vote on the variance? You know what I mean? What do you think? Is that getting too heady with Robert's rules of order here?
You lost me a little bit there. Now my head's spinning.
I just started thinking about the vote that we took on the modification to the first variance, and I think that what that was a combined vote in everybody's mind, correct me if I'm wrong, to not, we voted in that moment to revise the variance, and everybody voted their position on the revised variance, which is probably fine, but it might be cleaner if we say, hey, let's vote first to include a variance, and then once we have consensus that the variance will be included, then we can have the vote on whether we should approve or deny the variance. Do you know what I mean?
so you're talking on variance 3A, the reduction of.
Right,
Yeah, so
or four,
I would just call it 4
Yeah.
for clarity.
I guess
You know what I mean?
four is the.
I think what you're suggesting covers all the bases. So if you want to proceed
Okay.
that route, then we know.
So if you want to maybe first suggest, move for inclusion of move to propose a variance to the standard for Road A, and then after that, we can vote on whether we agree with that variance.
So I would recommend a variance for the road standard width requirements for Road A to 20 feet in width.
Do you have a second to include the variance?
Second.
Stephanie seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, 6-1. And then we'll vote on the agreeing with the variance, basically approving the variance. So if somebody wants to make that motion.
So if I'm correct, I could make a motion now for approval of the subdivision, subject to the.
I would first just make the motion to approve the new variance that was just agreed to be included. You know what I mean? Sorry if that's.
Yeah, we would need
John, are
language
you
for
recommending approval of the variance?
Yeah, right.
Is what you're saying.
First we recommended,
right.
first
Okay.
we decided to include.
So we include it.
variance.
All right, so I would recommend approval of the variance from a road standard width to 20 foot for Road A.
Okay, motion from Andy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vince. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No. 6-1.
I'm tracking you now. I wasn't following you, but first
Sorry,
one just was to get it in
I
there. The
can't-
second one was to approve or deny it.
I can't figure out if that's.
Sorry. Well,
whether that's right or
I
not.
think
but
I'm with you
anyway.
now.
Yeah, it's done now.
Yeah.
The die is cast.
Back to
Okay.
the sausage reference.
So, all right, so now we're on to the main motion. And let's see, that, I'm just going to give that a quick read and see if we need to say anything different here. 22. So yeah, I guess whoever decides to make the main motion,
I have a question.
yeah.
Do we need to deal with approving or denying variance number 2 still?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And number 3, actually. Because we never did go through that. Okay, so, yeah, good catch, Stephanie, thanks.
I want to add something about the sewer system under the conditions of recommendation. Just an added little bit.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if I need to do that at the end.
Should we finish up the variances first and then move on to that? Okay, so if somebody wants to make a motion with regard to variance 2 and 3, and then we can separately, but we can move through those and then get there.
So I'll recommend denial of a variance from subdivision regulations 3.4913 to relieve the applicant from constructing a pedestrian trail along the Highway 200 frontage.
Motion from Vince, do we have a second? Seconded by Michael. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously, so it was unanimously decided to deny the variance to the Highway 200 trail. Number 3.
I would move for the approval of a variance from the road standard requirements to pave Pine Grove to 24 feet in width.
Okay, we have a motion from Andy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Stephanie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, seeing none. On to revisions to conditions of approval.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to include the words, so this would be under item 5, recommended conditions of subdivision approval plat, section 2. The following statement shall be shown on the face of the plan, the conditions of approval sheet or in a recorded document subject to CAP's review and approval prior to final plat. Acceptance of a deed for a lot within this subdivision shall constitute a waiver of the right to protest a future RSID, SID for community or municipal water or sewer system for fire protection purposes.
Okay, we have a motion.
Well, you
Motion.
might reword that a little bit to say community
That's-
and municipal water for fire protection and sewage collection systems and treatment systems.
Perfect.
Okay, so is that a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion as amended by Andy? I'll second that. We have a second and a third. All right, seconded by Peter. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. I'm sorry, I didn't request any comment on that motion, but nobody interrupted me, so
I think he's escaped.
we're good. Okay. Any other revisions to conditions of approval from the board? No? Okay, if someone is interested in the main event here. Top of page 22, and of course, this is subject to all previous amendments and discussion here tonight.
I'll do it. I
right.
recommend that, or I move that the Woody Mountain Court subdivision be recommended to the Board of County Commissioners for approval based on the findings of fact in the staff report and public testimony, subject to conditions of approval.
Motion from Stephanie, do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Michael.
Third.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Peter opposed. Okay. Subdivision is recommended for approval. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all the info. Thanks. What did we do? We approved it. Or recommended that it be approved.
Yeah. Could be worse. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I'm no attorney.
Okay, item 7, communications and special presentations. We have none of those. Committee reports, do we have any committee reports? Hasn't been a LUTAC. Hey, everybody, just so you know, we still have the meeting happening here. Committee reports, there has not been a land use technical advisory committee or the map update meeting in quite a while, but we have one scheduled towards the end of the month, so I'll have something to say the next time. But other than that, do we have any committee reports at all? No? Do we have any committee members here right now? Isn't Dudley kind of our default guy? The retiree?
Or Jamie attends
Oh,
Right.
the other one.
Right, the
TPCC.
Urban Growth Commission that meets once every 15 years. Old business? Yes.
So at our last planning board meeting, I talked about bringing forward a draft of recommendations that we could look at with regards to historic preservation of school district property. And I am working on that, and so I'll email it out to the group for just feedback. Would be great. So to come soon.
Awesome. Any other old business or comments on Helen's item? Okay, new business and referrals? None? Comments from planning board members? That was fun, personally. I know that's kind of sick, but I really like that complicated Roberts stuff. And we're out, adjourned. Thanks, guys.